Dear students, welcome to week 11, module 1, dealing with the International Labour Organization. Over the years, work had been going on way back, starting from 1800s, on some aspects of labour rights. In fact, all of them eventually culminated in the founding of the International Labour Office under the League of Nations in the year 1919, and the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the World War I, provided in its annexure a portion relating to the labour. In fact, if you look at the ILO constitution, it asserts that universal and lasting peace can be established only if it is based on social justice. In other words, they recognized the linkage between peace on the one hand and protection of the labour rights on the other, and they recognized that these both are linked, and it is essential for if the universal and lasting peace is to be secured, and it only can be based on the social justice. In fact, in the year 1946, the UN Special Agency was created, and this same organization was elevated to the rank of a special agency with a headquarters in Geneva in Switzerland, and of course with a number of field offices across the world. And ILO has a unique tripartite structure in the sense that its executive bodies comprise of members of governments, employers, and also representatives of workers. In fact, there are 185 states which are members of the International Labour Organization. Among its executive bodies, there are three which are very important. One is a general conference of representatives of members, and then there is a governing body, and then there is a International Labour Office. Now, first let us take up the general conference of the representatives of members. In fact, this is the highest body, and it gives recommendations, it evolves and or adopts the conventions or labour standards from time to time, and it approves the work program of ILO, and it also approves the policies that ILO shall adopt, approves the budget of the ILO. Then it is assisted by a governing body which comprises of 56 members. Here again partly government, partly employers representatives, and partly the workers representatives. The International Labour Office is headed by the rank of a Director General, and which reports to the governing body, and the work of the International Labour Office is supervised by the governing body. In the year 1926, there was a committee of experts was established for monitoring and reporting on the international labour standards, and that continued even today. Now, let us briefly review the normative framework for the protection of the labour rights. If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted in the year 1948, it explicitly provided freedom from slavery or servitude. It also talked about right to rest, right to leisure, and freedom of association. Subsequently, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights as well as International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights were adopted in the year 1966, and they came into force in 1976. In fact, you find that some rights, like particularly civil, political, labour rights have been taken care of in ICCPR. On the other hand, economic, social, labor rights have been incorporated in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. Let us take them for greater or detailed examination. ICCPR in fact provided for freedom from slavery or servitude. It also provided for freedom of association, right to form trade unions, etc., and that is insofar as civil, political, labor rights are concerned. And if you look at the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, there are a number of articles which deal with right to work, right to just conditions of work, about safe, healthy working condition, equal pay for equal work, right to organize collectively, right to strike, and all these are basically mentioned in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. Dear students, we have seen the norms that were evolved under the UN General Assembly. Now, several regional systems, including the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, the African Convention on Human and People's Rights, also seek to protect several labor rights. ILO has drafted in 1998 and adopted its Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. In fact, it has listed 4 such fundamental principles and rights at work. They include: 1. Freedom of association and effective recognition of right to collective bargaining. 2. Elimination of all forms of forced or compulsory labor. 3. Effective abolition of child labor. Number 4. Elimination of discrimination in employment and occupation. Now, ILO has asked all members, regardless of whether they have signed and ratified the related conventions, to report on these particular principles, and it asks them to respect, it asks them to protect these rights which are mentioned in the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. Subsequently, these fundamental principles were elaborated in 8 core ILO conventions. Now, the member states are required to submit progress reports from time to time, and these are considered and the recommendations are made at the end of the consideration. In addition to the reports submission by the member states, there is also a complaints procedure about violation of the rights enshrined in particular convention, and these complaints are considered, and then the views are given on the individual complaints. If you look at the International Labour Organization, it has been a prolific lawmaker. It has adopted over 189 conventions on various facets of decent work and employment and protection of labor rights. It has also adopted 6 protocols and given over 200 plus recommendations on different aspects. Its work across the world in different countries has led to compilation of labor statistics on different aspects. Now, there are critics who hold that it could have done more. For instance, UK Department for International Development, DFID, withdrew its funding for ILO, stating that its field operations could have been more effective, and it also said there could have been greater transparency in results reporting, and they have also cited a number of other factors which could have been addressed by the International Labour Organization in order to be recognized as an effective watchdog for protecting the rights of laborers. On the one hand, ILO has done impressive work in the field of norms enunciation, in the field of drafting standards, and it has also been a vigorous or a vigilant watchdog, and it has consciously mainstreamed a human rights dimension in its monitoring, and it has maybe it requires sustained monitoring, it requires sustained vigilance in the coming years in order to ensure that labor rights are protected across the world by everyone.